Darlene, and then I'm going to Tony.
Okay, thank you, Chris.
Sure.
I wanted to, and maybe you could verify this. I do qualify for the San Francisco reparations because I have lived in San Francisco for 30 years. I currently live in Fairfield, California. One of the things about San Francisco is that there is an age requirement. You have to be 18 and over, and you have to also have lived in San Francisco during one of their periods of harms. And Chris, can you verify that San Francisco is trying to do executive order opposed to going to legislation? That's a really big difference between California and San Francisco.
Yeah, so the question is about how is San Francisco trying to get their reparations done versus how we expect the state to get it done. And this was to your question earlier about what's next. I'll pause for a second because it really does depend on what the Reparations Task Force recommends. We already have an idea of what they're recommending, and especially if we're talking about money, generally speaking, that has to go through a legislative bill process. If we are talking about money. So generally speaking, to put out the kind of money that we're talking about, the governor wouldn't be able to just do that by executive order. Generally speaking. In San Francisco, though, I think they are trying a couple different pathways. I think they are looking for stuff that the governor can do by, the mayor of San Francisco can do on her own, and the stuff that the city council or the city representatives of San Francisco have to do as a group. This is important too because the state task force is recommending some things that the legislature can't do on its own either. The state reparations task force is recommending some things that would potentially have to come to us as a people to vote on. So every two to 4 years, y'all see something called, y'all see things like proposition this or proposition that or prop number this, right? So that's short for ballot proposition, right? Generally, if you want to do certain specific things like change the California Constitution, the people have to say something about it. The people have to say yes. Okay? Almost every time you see a proposition number this, a proposition number that, that is something to change the Constitution. We're doing some basic political knowledge right now. The Constitution is different than the laws. The Constitution is different than the laws. The Constitution is in charge of the laws. You can't make laws that go against the Constitution, otherwise we call them unconstitutional, and the law has to go. Okay, and the way you show a law is unconstitutional is you take it to court. Right? The court is the decision making about whether a law is allowed and constitutional or not allowed and unconstitutional. The State Reparations Task Force is recommending some things that would require a change in the state constitution. To change the state constitution, generally you and I have to say yes, we want it, or no, we don't want it. So some things may have to come to us as a people. That's different though, I think, than the stuff that we are most focused on, like the money, the new agency, etc. So it's important to understand that, because depending on what the city of San Francisco is recommending, the mayor of San Francisco could probably do it. But if we're talking about the kind of money that San Francisco is talking about, $5 million per eligible person and all that, it's almost impossible for me to think that the city council won't have to say something about that in San Francisco. Now I'm giving you my general knowledge though about San Francisco. Good morning.
Do you have to be 18 for the California one too, or are they including kids under that? Because I know it says 71 to 2020, so are minors also, or not minors, just anybody after that 1977 part that they had at the top?
So there's no, for what I remember, there's no age limit on the state work. And the harm periods are generally from 1850 to 2020. You You mentioned 1970.
It says something about 1933 to
Okay, gotcha.
1977, then 71 to 2020.
I wanna talk about this, because this is important too. So y'all may have seen some in the news about, well, what's the 1933 to 1977 thing going on? So, I don't wanna complicate this, I'm gonna put this down. So, the State Reparations Task Force was asked to answer the question of how much is this gonna cost the state of California? How much is reparations gonna cost the state of California? So to answer this question, the State Reparations Task Force hired a team of economists. All right, if y'all know what that is, that's just a group of people whose job it is to right now figure out how much is this gonna cost.
Numbers.
Right. The people who put the numbers on. This group of people, this team, there's four of them. Dr. William Darity Jr., Thomas Kramer, Casey Campbell, and William Spriggs. Okay? Really accomplished group of people, nationally known. They do a lot of great work. I think Dr. Darity's out of MIT and Duke University. He's probably the top reparations economist in the country. Thomas Kramer's done work all across the world. Bill Spriggs, he's at Howard actually, and he is the chief economist for the AFL-CIO, one of the biggest unions. And then Casey Campbell, I forget exactly what her background is, but she's done a lot of great work too. So, how much is this going to cost was the question. And so the economist said, well, in order for us to answer this question, task force, y'all got to tell us, one, who is it for, and what periods of harm are you talking about? So we could at least have a general start to put some numbers on this. This was back in 2021 that they started working on this. The economists came back after that and said, all right, we have, there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to try to put numbers on, and we are trying to figure out how much to put on each thing, but we have some numbers for some stuff. So for stuff, bad things, harms related to health, we could put some numbers on it. Plus, and we can tell you what periods we are putting numbers on it for, 1850 to 2020. When they got to the housing part though, they said, all right, there's two pieces to the housing part. We're gonna give you a general time period of 1850 to 2020 for harms related to housing. So we're gonna put numbers on what we're owed as a people because of all the bad stuff that happened to us in housing. Okay? And they said, in addition to that, because we have some specific information about redlining. How many people heard about redlining, right? Okay, that was the practice of telling us that we can't live in this neighborhood, we gotta live over there, and etc. Right? I mean, Sacramento was redlined. I mean, there's probably no city in America that wasn't redlined.
Right.
Okay? And actually, yeah. So, but the economist said, we can put some specific numbers on redlining too, even though we have a general housing harm period, 1850 to 2020, because we know more about redlining, we can put some specific numbers on it, and we could put some specific times on it. And the economist said, redlining to us, economists, we could say starts in 1933, because that's when something called the Fair Housing Act was passed. That was the beginning of what you might call redlining. In 1933, it was like the New Deal, Depression era stuff. 1933 is the beginning of redlining to the economists. 1977 is the on paper end of redlining to the economists, because that's when something called the Community Reinvestment Act was passed. So that was supposed to end redlining. Did it? Probably not.
It
No.
sure did.
Okay.
Wells Fargo
Right.
was just charged.
Thank you very much. I was just about to say, a lot of people say that what we lived through in the 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009 housing crash was what they call reverse redlining. Okay? We all lived through reverse redlining. But the economists who work with the task force said, because we can give you more specific information about redlining, we're gonna pick 1933 and 1977. That's gonna be the period of redlining, and boom, here's the numbers that we're gonna put on that for how much we're owed. So that's where 1933 and 1977 come from. Mm-hmm. You don't really have to know all that. What you really gotta know is, generally speaking, harms, numbers, dollar figures, compensation, reparations related to housing the period of time that they're talking about is from 1850 to 2020. Why they pick 2020? I think they picked 2020, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, my family in the back. I think they wanted to stop at when the governor signed the reparations task force bill, which was in September 2020, I think.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's why you saw again, it was, the press picked it up, and so it got more attention than it probably should have. The draft report that the task force has out now, but that we're going to see in its final form next month. I've never seen some of the stuff in there before. There's some. Got it. There's some. I've never seen people actually put a dollar figure on what we lost as a people and turn that into how much we're owed. I've never seen that before, and I read through the draft, and I mean there's formulas in there and something that you should know too. Originally, there were 12 harms that the task force said to the economists, put some numbers on each one of these, and this is how much people owed. There was 12, right?
Staggering.
Right? Slavery, political disenfranchisement, racial terror, health harms, education harms, theft of our cultural intellectual property, mass incarceration, environmental harms, the wealth gap, pathologizing the black family, one or two more. There were 12 different things that the task force said, y'all economists, put some numbers on this, and this is how much we got to pay people. The economists did their work over 2 years. They said, listen, we don't have information for all these, enough information for all these. We have enough information to put numbers on 5 of these. For the other 7, we're going to give you the formula to use. So when you get the information, you plug the information in, and this is how much people are owed. Okay? They have information for the health harms, to put dollar figures on it, mass incarceration, to put dollar figures on it, education-related harms, to put dollar figures on it.
I know it's a lot.
The devaluation of our black businesses, they had dollar figures for that, and they had dollar figures for housing, right? And eminent domain property takings housing. Right?
Say a number, Chris. Say it.
So I'm on camera. I can't do it.
Turn the camera on.
So I'll say a general number. I'll say general. So the loss to our people in California is almost $1 trillion.
Wow.
Just with those 5, just with 5 out of the 7, the losses to us as a people are about $1 trillion. Okay, it's been between 800 billion and $1 trillion.
Just in California?
Just in the state of California,
Wow.
just for those
Just
5
imagine the
out of
whole
7.
US.
All right.
Imagine.
Now, right, and that's a minimum.
Around the world.
That's a minimum. Okay.
That's the minimum.
Okay. Because that's 5 out of the 7. The other 7, we don't have all of the data for yet, but the economists said we're not going to leave y'all hanging. We're going to give y'all a way to get the dollar figure final number. Once you get the information, we're just going to give you the formula. You just put this in there, you put that in there, you add it up. That's how much is owed. Okay, that was a long answer to the question, but
Let me get it
Other
straight.
That's a lot of zeros.
That was 5 of the 12.
5 of the 12. Yeah.
5 of the 12 got us $1 trillion.
5 of the 12 equals about $1 trillion in losses. Okay. Now, and let me ask you, let me take that because I think this is a good next question, which is, can we afford this as a state? Can California afford this?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have the monies?
Yeah, we got
they
it.
print me.
I would say yeah.
Fifth largest.
Right. You know, it's crazy. Like if anybody ever owe you money, what they tell you? Well, you know, how much I owe you too much money, so I can't pay you back. Nobody would go for that, right? If you owe us, it really don't matter how much. You owe us.
Start today.
Right, and
Piece mine off.
right on. the state of California, those of y'all know this probably, many of y'all know this, the state of California is the fourth largest economy on planet Earth. Okay? Not in the country. On our state has the fourth largest economy, does more business than all other countries in the world, with the exception of 3. And one of the other 3 is our country. Okay? The state of California has the 4th or 5th, I think we moved from 5th to 4th last year, 4th largest economy on planet Earth. Okay?
Where's the 800 billion coming from?
Good question. So, and that's part of the answer to the question I'm asking. Can we afford this, and where is the money coming from? So we have options. Okay, we have almost $250 billion general fund budget every year. So $250 billion, $250 billion every year we spend as a state just to run our state. Right. So we have money in our general fund. We $250 billion, so $250 or so billion every single year we spend just to run our state. So that's one place to look for the money. We also have something called a rainy day fund. Y'all don't know, California has something called a rainy day fund.
It's raining.
Or I'm about to say it's raining. It's been raining. Okay. California has a rainy day fund. We actually put money every time there's a budget surplus. We have to by law put money into the rainy day fund. I'm not sure how many billions in it, but it's money in there.
Chris, I keep hearing about the budget, the deficit ceiling or something.
Yeah, that's
What
a good.
is that?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, every year, it's like when we balance our own checkbooks, and I don't know if we use checkbooks anymore, but we balance our own household balance sheets, right? Our own household money. Sometimes, or let's say every month we get a certain amount of money. We get paid every 2 weeks, every week, whatever. Sometimes the money we spend out is more than the money we brought in. And so in that case, we got a deficit, right? Because we spent more than we brought in. That's a deficit. California, this year, California has a deficit, meaning California spent more money than we brought in, okay? Last year, though, we had a surplus. Last year, we had $100 billion extra dollars. Morning, brother.
Ukraine.
Okay. Last year, we had 100 or so billion extra dollars. Okay, that was last year. Okay, this year we have, I think it's like a 50 or something billion dollar deficit, meaning we short $50 billion.
$31.5 billion.
Close the border.
$31.5 billion. Okay, so now my point is, and my thing is,
shit, they just spent $44 million last year on the damn water.
right? I mean, we're spending money, right? For me, it's about, do we have the will to do this? Because we got the money. Okay, so with an economy like ours, as big as ours, when we want to afford something, we can afford it. It's just about, do we want to afford it? And keep in mind, this is also wealth that folks are returning to us.
Right.
Okay, this is ours in the first
When they
place.
paid other people, they didn't ask for public opinion. They're asking for all kind of public opinion. We're on display with all of our trauma and everything that has happened to us. We're out in the open with it. Why is that when it comes to the black man that we have to be so loud about our traumas and about what's happening? Why can't we just open our mailbox and get a check?
I'm with you.
Because they scared of us.
The brother Dale is absolutely
They didn't do
correct.
that to the Chinese, they just got a check in the mail. Nobody else has had to be so, and then they're asking the public, of course, when they ask white folks, oh, there she is, Betty. Oh, there she is, NAACP. Hey, girl.
I literally just got off of Amtrak and came on.
Really?
Thank you very much. Thank you. Your point is well taken, though. And this is, but let's keep it real. As a people, we had to fight to not be treated like property and cattle,
Everything is a fight.
animals.
Because we prisoners of war.
We've had to fight
Say it.
for everything that we achieve in this country. So I don't like it. but I'm not surprised that we have to fight for this too, and we have to do things that other groups didn't do. I don't like it. I'm not surprised. I think there is some misunderstanding too about some of the other stuff that other groups had to do. For example, let's talk about the Japanese folks. You'll notice that, you'll notice that one of the task force members,
Yeah,
okay,
I saw it.
John Tamaki.
okay,
Yeah.
is
Sushi.
Japanese. Okay, so actually that is Attorney Don Tamaki. He actually helped his parents and his parent generation get reparations for their people, but in the Japanese case, remember they were mass incarcerated, interned. Actually, many of those folks were pulled right out of here where we at now. Where we at right now in Sacramento, a lot of the Japanese folks that were interned were pulled right out of here, right out of this city, and driven right up, right
after Pearl
right on. And that was in right
Two lakes up
exactly.
near the border of Oregon and California.
Right.
One spot, then in Arizona, Manzanar down there.
Right.
Southern
Right.
California.
Right, and that was in
Relocation
the
camps, they call them.
right the concentration camps, the internment,
Concentration camp.
right, the internment camps. That was in the 1940s. They didn't get reparations until 1989, 80,
Shorter time
88.
than ours.
Right, and we are
Ours
still
still go on,
right,
yeah.
right.
And the
So
40 acres and the mule,
that was in the the
No.
1860s. But
Martin
it is
Luther King
important to
said it
understand.
very clearly, insufficient fund, check.
Right,
What happened,
right.
right? What happened?
And he said we're coming to get our check too.
so, hello.
Right.
Cash in hand, I'm ready.
Right. Right, yeah, that's one, you don't hear
They leave that
that
out.
during MLK Day, but, yeah, Dr. King was obviously a big, advocate for reparations. Malcolm X was also too. It's a part of what we've had to do as a people. Again, I don't like it, but I'm not surprised that this is a part of what we've had to do to get what's ours as a people. But as I said to start, that we are closer than we've been since the Civil War. And you are living in the generation right now that will receive reparations from the state of California. Right? We can work on the federal national government's been. California is about 40 years ahead of the national government. Okay? The national government, the federal government has been trying to just do a study for reparations since 1988, 1989. Okay, and California did it in two years. Gentlemen, because the next question, yes.
I don't have a question, I'm just gonna follow up. We live in a society where if it wasn't documented in the way that the 1940s were documented, then it didn't happen, right? You look at what's happening in Florida, let's just write away this history. So in generations later, it never happened. So we are led by a country of people who would like to not own up to something because they didn't live through it, and so it's your imagination. Where are the pictures to show people in slavery,
Right.
well, even though they had a couple of, with the guy with the vac or whatever, but it's a figment of our imagination, our struggle. Oh, that's not real, and they're trying to indoctrinate new generations of people that this is just black people giving excuses for why black people are the way they are, right? We know that's not the truth, So I feel like this country and the other countries, because you look at Germany, because their atrocious behavior was well documented, they feel more obligated to pay out so they can wipe themselves of the guilt.
Right.
And what they have done to black people, although we feel that is extremely well documented, is documented every time a bullet go in the back or a knee go in the neck.
Right.
They still don't link that to what they did to us 150 years ago. So I think that we've been owed it, but it doesn't surprise me that they don't want to pay on their debt because they're trying to wipe that debt clean.
Right.
Can I make a statement real quick?
Sure.
I'm glad way you put that too, because we all know every time these things come up, whether it's reparations or something, oh, you gotta prove it. Oh, you gotta prove it. Well, the task force, their final report is going to be up to 1,000 pages of evidence, pure evidence from California and across the country. Okay, in some way, somehow, they're gonna try to balk at that too, but it's there. It's completely there. A lot of that was in the interim report that was released last June in 2022, which it was a 483 document. But now they're moving to another direction where you got 1,000 pages here. Okay, and it's more than that. We know that. We can go 400 years and stuff. But you are right. It's the point where we have to get them to acknowledge that these atrocities and these harms has taken place, and you cannot deny it. Okay. Matter of fact, they can't deny it, but they just try to avoid it. Based on what you were saying too about the movement, yes, we got to get out there. We got to get out in the streets, and we have to make these things known. I would say probably no sooner after that report is, and it will be released June 29th here in Sacramento at State Capitol. That would be the last official meeting, the last
Chris,
charge.
all the people that you're doing these segments on, the work that you're doing, or will you be able to rise these people and bring them forth to the Capitol?
That's part of why I'm here, and that's part of what my job is. So the answer is yes, but that's part of what we're doing now. And that's part of, but that begins with, first it begins with, and I've been organizing for a while, so it begins with building relationships, obviously, and education, right? Y'all gotta see us, y'all gotta know who we are, right? I mean, that's just good organizing, right? You know, if you don't know who we are, if you don't see us in the neighborhoods, it's so much, first of all, it's disrespectful to you anyway, to ask you to do something for us, right? But part of what we're doing now is building relationships and educating folks. And once people get more knowledge, get more awareness, people are like, okay, I want to do something right now. Like, what can I do right now? I want to say one thing. I think Tony made a good point too, and it's something that I didn't share, and I want to make sure that I share this because it's important too. So the task force is, again, there will be direct compensation as a part of what the task force recommends. So direct payments to those who are eligible as part of what the task force recommends. There's 2 levels to it though. It's important. There's 2 levels to it. Okay? There's a, I'm gonna try to get the words right. I don't want to confuse nobody, but there's a, I was gonna say the word indirect. So everybody who is a descendant and who meets the 6 months residency will be eligible for something. You won't have to show that I was specifically harmed in housing, or I was specifically harmed in education, or I was specifically harmed in healthcare, or I was specifically harmed with mass incarceration. Right. You won't have to demonstrate that. You won't have to show no documents for that. Everybody who's a descendant, foot number 1, and meets the residency, foot number 2, will be eligible for something. Will be eligible, and what you'll be eligible for will depend on how long you live in California. That's the first level, okay? So that's all of the descendants, no matter what. The second level is though, if you have something specific, a specific bad thing that happened to your family specifically. I'm thinking about Jonathan Burgess and his family, who's had their family land taken from them in Coloma. The family that their ancestors were enslaved on. They had to take it. Now it's a state park. It's the Coloma State Park now. Okay. I'm thinking about the Bassiano family. I'm thinking about the Russell City family. I'm thinking about what you could have thought about the Bruce's family and Manhattan Beach as an example of this. If you have a specific claim to, on top of what you already getting, you will be able to file a specific claim on top of that. Okay, so that's the second level.
Well, that should be one of those.
It would, yeah. I mean, it's a part of what they call racial terror. So yeah, that would definitely count.
So would that have had to happen here in California, or could it have happened somewhere else?
That will probably have to be. I expect, and this is my expectation. I don't have a answer from the task force on this, but my expectation is that it will have to have been here in California. So you will have to have.
Do we have a sign-in sheet that everybody signed in?
No, we didn't bring sign, but I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I am getting contact. Before we leave.
There should be some QR codes on there too.
Say that again?
There should be QR codes on the flyer, right?
Yeah, we got. Every one of your cards has a QR code too. By the way. No worries. That one right there. Yep.
Okay.
Perfect.
I wanted to ask you about this historical part, Allensworth.
Oh, Alan.
So Allensworth, thank you for,
All those people, most of them have moved to Frisco,
Mhm.
Fresno, Bakersfield. I've met a lot of them, you know.
Yeah.
They will get there, sir.
so the answer is they would be eligible for the general and the specific claim on top of that. So we actually, I'm gonna give a shout out to my brother here, you Moy, who got the camera,
Okay.
Kim in the back. We actually toured Allensworth on our way back from one of the Reparations Task Force hearings. I mean, I had mixed feelings because one, you see like a black hotel, when you see a black hotel, a black school, a black barbershop, a black church,
Yeah,
black
yeah.
houses.
Yeah.
You see, you know, now, these are all like, it's a park now. It's a state park now. So you see like what it could have been. And to be honest with you, when we talked to the people who actually live in Allensworth, they told us that what we saw was only a shell, what was originally there. They also told us that they are also still now fighting for reparations in a sense, to actually
That
repair
hurts. That
what
hurts.
was or what could have been. And I mean, it was tough because when you learn about what happened to the people there, when you learn about what the U.S. government did, how they diverted the whole river around the town,
Yeah.
um,
Stop the train from
how they
coming
stopped the
through.
train from coming into the city. So folks in Allensworth would be eligible for a specific claim too, on top of what they're already doing.
Have they considered future thing like, because that just made me think, how about if they put something together where we could move back to Allensworth and make that a thriving town all over?
Yeah. So there is. So I want to be careful because the task force has talked about this. There are recommendations about this in the task force final report. But I don't want to say it because I'm not going to get it exactly right. But so I'll say generally speaking, the task force is recommending remedies, things to allow for places like Allensworth. There's a bunch of them here in
They're
California.
talking about
places like Allensworth.
communities.
Yeah,
We don't even have communities.
Right. Name some other black towns in California. Right, Allensworth. I know there's a few more too, but the task force is making recommendations here.
East Palo
Right on. So there are recommendations specifically about how to rebuild and repair those specific communities.
Gentrification.
There is, right.
They redline.
when they issue it out for programs and
It depends on how you do it. It depends on how you do it. And again, that's
Reparations if they control it.
right on. That's a very good point, and that's a very good way to put it too. It really does depend on how it's done. And it, of course, as the task force has already said, this has to be specifically for those who are descendants and meet that residency. So there can't be really any, we're going to just give this to your area, to your neighborhood because. But for the specifics, I have to follow back up because I don't want to give bad information.
I gotta ask these questions before we wind up the time, really quick, because I've been meeting with the mayor when it comes to reparations for Sacramento. So you may have, I don't know what's been happening before I came, so I didn't know if you knew about San Francisco and their reparation task force. Okay, and so they have a task force, and they came back with the recommendation of many, but one of the ones that caught the news is that they felt like in the city of San Francisco, all black people should get $5 million each. And so, $5 million
This is
each. San Francisco, that's their task force. So the question here, number one, do you think in this room, by the show of hands, we should have our own Sacramento task force?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll put my fist up.
I want Chris on,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Chris on the team.
I have a question
So,
about
so,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can we
Why
ask
are they
questions?
dividing it up to different cities?
You want, this is something only San Francisco did.
Oh, okay.
One, two, I know there's money out there for organizations like NAACP, like we're doing right now, to have these coffee and conversations that's passionate and intimate to our groups, right? So we want to hear, without the big bullhorns and the stage and the microphones and all the political people who's running for office in the room. We want you in the room, right?
Grassroots.
Grassroots. So with that, they have money from the state, all the counties do, the cities do, to start a task force in their city or town. So that's one. Two, if we have a task force, because I'm going to go back and say this first group said 100% we should have a task force for Sacramento. So,
That's right.
so unless somebody in this room that I hadn't heard from said no, we don't.
I did.
Okay.
And, but I wanted some more information. Why do we need one specific for Sacramento, just to talk about specifically Sacramento issues?
So that's what we would determine what that task force will be responsible for. So for example, that task force can be responsible for making sure that each African American in Sacramento get the 1.2 that you guys suggested, 1.2 million that you guys suggested, or the 5 million that San Francisco suggested, whatever that is, that's one. Two, that task force will determine, in addition to actually cash in your hand, would we put more money into home ownership? We need to own property. Would we put more money into businesses, black-owned businesses?
Come on.
Would we put more money into access to education, whether it's a degree or vocational? We need those pieces, and we need to make sure that the state, and so we define what that task force look like. And so I'm partnering with Chris, and it is a good idea that you be on the Sacramento one. But I'm partnering with Chris, so we want to define what that looks like. We decide that we want a Sacramento task force. Does that help, Dale?
How many members would be on the Sacramento task force?
We can decide that too.
It'll be up to us.
Will be up to us. So we want to, and I'm hoping my folks is documenting this. How many do we want? It based on each district. We have 8 districts. Do we want 8 people plus 1 to make it uneven for a vote? Yeah. So we can. I'm making this up, but we can define that. And so if we're saying we want a task force, then we define what we want that task force to do, and do we want the task force to look like us?
Yes.
Well, I have some folks that may want to mix it up.
No.
So we have these type of conversations here. Do we want them to look like us?
Yes, of course.
Without
Okay.
question.
Okay. So
So it seems like in essence, each city should have their own task force so they can count their own people, so they'll know overall how much to give each person and everybody can be accounted for. Is that
they have that option, but we ain't worried about them.
Worry about us.
The one that went out in front in California anyway was San Francisco went first.
Okay.
And so they knew there was money out there to create their own task force within their city. I think the information is just now getting to us in other cities that we have that same option. And so if we do that, we need to be in front of it. We as black people, we're always the last one. The checks have been written, and by the time you figure out where the rest of the money is, they're trying to figure out where we are. So I'm trying to get in front of the train, so that we can define early what that looks like and to bring that information back to the mayor, because I'm part of a pre-task meeting. And so we've been meeting, and I thought it was the task force meeting. I was like, that's not the task
working group, yeah.
No, right? Oh, no, Betty. We have money. We're trying to determine if we even need one. Oh, okay, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to start having
That's right.
meetings in the community like this.
Right.
And you're going to hear directly from those voices in the community and go from there. And so that's why you're here as well, is to get the background and the information, because, our phone people started calling me after Newsom said no to the 1.2 million that you guys had suggested. I didn't think it was enough, so I don't know what he was talking about. So those are some things. So I know some folks had questions about what I was presenting, and I'm hoping you guys have been buying some drinks and stuff.
Yes, please do make sure, I'm saying for the third or fourth time, make sure you patronize Drip Espresso, yeah.
Any questions?
Okay.
I do have a question for Chris.
Would that mean that money is allotted for Sacramento for education of reparations and all that? Is that because that's what they did on the regular task force of reparations? They said that they had allotted a couple of $1 million, and they gave it to nonprofits to get out and do the grass, the footwork.
This would be allowed for Sacramento. So to do the outreach, and we want to just make sure that the right people that look like us
That's
is doing
right.
the outreach,
That's
because
right.
they can hire people that don't look like us, and then those people contract us to do work for black people. And so that I'm not with, and so it's a new page, it's a new thing.
A new day.
It's a new day.
I had a general question. Is it going to be taxed, whether it's state or federal? We have to pay taxes
Good
on
question.
it? And also, too, what about people who are disabled and people that are still incarcerated? How would that be?
So I can take that from the state perspective. Two good questions. So the first question is the reparations going to be taxed or tax-free? Okay. The State Reparations Task Force is recommending that the reparations be tax-free. Okay.
Federal too,
Right, and I'm talking about at the state level, right? The State Reparations Task Force can only make recommendations for what the state can do, and that's actually one of the lessons that other places that did reparations told the State Task Force, which is make sure that this is tax-free. So I expect it to be tax-free at the state state level.
Federal level.
At the federal level, it would depend on. Now,
That's the bigger of it too.
Yeah, it would depend on when the federal government, when the national government finally gets to where we are, then I expect them to follow with a tax-free reparations plan too. Part of our job though will be to make sure that it is tax-free, and part of our job here in the state is going to be to make sure, this is what we were talking about earlier, about making sure that the bill that we see over the next, again, as early as December, as late as February, is actually tax-free. And what's in there is actually tax-free. It's already recommended by the State Task Force, but we have to make sure that it stays like that, and that the legislators don't try to change that or put something else in that, or add a different kind of tax to, right? Yeah.
You may have already discussed this, I'm not sure, but San Francisco asked for 5 million. We're asking for 1.5. Is it like city to city? Is it because of the cost of living, or should everybody get the same? Or
Yeah, got you.
how are they doing that?
Yeah, good question. So San Francisco has a dollar figure for every, that's the same for everybody who's eligible, and the eligibility is a little bit different.
Okay.
Here at the state level though, how much you're eligible for depends on whether you meet those two eligibility criteria, a descendant and meet the residency, and then how much you're eligible for depends on how long you've lived in California. So not everybody is eligible for the same thing. Generally speaking, the longer you've lived in California, the more you're eligible for. The $1.2 million that we've been hearing about, as we were saying earlier, is really an example of someone who was, I think they use a 71-year-old who lived all their life in California and meets the two eligibility. Generally speaking, that's around the range of how much they would be eligible for. But again, how much each and every single one of us is specifically eligible for will depend on how long we've lived in the state of California. San Francisco is a little bit different because they've given us specific.
So I'm gonna ask, some of the last few questions. No, I want you to ask your questions. I want your answers to be shorter. Because we promised this establishment from 4 to 6, and it's after 6 already. And so I just, yeah. But I did see a few hands up, and I do want to acknowledge that. So let's get those hands, and then let's get.
Well, can you finish about the disabled and incarcerated?
Yeah, so
I think that's kind of important.
So for the folks who are disabled,
Thank you so much.
so as long as they meet the eligibility, they would be eligible. Of course, there will have to be some special accommodations made though for folks who are not just disabled, not just incarcerated, but folks who are adopted, folks who've been through the child welfare system, etc. So there will be some special accommodations made for those folks.
How will people get their specific documentation, and what documentation is needed? Is it a census? Is it a marriage license? Is it a birth certificate? Is it a death certificate?
Right.
And where do we take that information to?
Right on. So there's two questions there. What documents will you need? Where would you take them? So the first answer is to be determined. Right? We don't know exactly yet what specific documents you're going to need yet. We do have an idea though of where you're going to need to take them, and that is to what the state is going to be setting up, which will be called the Office of Genealogy, inside of the California American Freedmen Affairs Agency. There will be two new, CAAFA, there will be two new places in the state, two new parts of our government specifically set up to do those things, but not just those things either. There's a lot more to it.
And say the acronym again,
It's California American Freedmen Affairs Agency, CAFAA.
Okay, thank you so much.
So, suppose you move from Sacramento to LA, or you move from Sacramento to somewhere else. If you move to another state, you're out, I'm not sure. But if you move to, let's say, LA, you still.
So, that's a good question. So, right now, the way the task force has talked about it, you don't have to be a current California resident. As long as you have at least 6 months residency in California between the years of 1815 2020, and you are a descendant, then how much you're eligible for will depend on how long you've lived in California.
Okay.
So you may be eligible for less because you left or moved, but
if you're in California and just move to another city.
yeah, you're state level, you're fine.
We have a question back here too.
Maybe I will back at you.
They were born here.
Yeah.
So, I know that
We got you on video.
a lot of the parties involved, mostly on the Democratic side. But what are some of the Republicans having a conversation about this, and how do we kind of get from favoritism of both parties to interest first?
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that. That's a great question, a great point. The question is about the how do we get people from all different kind of parties and politicians from all different kind of parties to support this. You should know first that the law that created the task force for reparations, Democrats voted for it and Republicans voted for it here in the state of California. So there were Republicans that voted for the state of California reparations task force law. Right? Now that's different from a bill with money in it and all that stuff, and we're going to see. But I expect that there will be some Republicans who will be able to support this. And part of our job is going to be to make sure that as many Republicans support as possible, as many Democrats support as possible. But keep in mind though that California has the Democratic Party controls the state of California politics at the state Senate level and the state assembly level. They can pass anything they want with no Republicans at all. I'm more focused right now on what you might call the conservative Democrats than I am of the Republicans. We're going to need all of the Democrats too. We got one here that go ahead.
Well, Mary, I was responding to the prospect of the commission, a local commission here in Sacramento, and just wanted to say that I think that Sacramento should be instrumental in helping to create the infrastructure for the Freedmen's Office, being the capital of California, and this is where the legislation takes place. So I would like to see them really be active in helping create that infrastructure. And also that it not be a process that's kicked down the road too long. We've already got a blueprint in place that Sacramento can follow. So I'd like to see a local commission be more put in place more for implementation purposes.
In action. Right?
Action, yeah. Implementation.
I'm with you 100%. Of course. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
so I was gonna ask one with the example of San Francisco, the reparations that they could receive doesn't exclude them from the state. Okay.
Yeah.
So, let me answer that question. The next question is, so I was watching the video of what happened in Oakland, and I saw a conversation around the language and talking about what's that? Racial equity. That was coming up a lot. Where are they with that?
So that's a good question. So the brother's asking, this is a very important point too, and then maybe it's the last question, right? So at the last task force hearing, there was questions about, well, why does it in the report, why does it say stuff like raise the minimum wage, or like what repeal the death penalty, or stuff that is clearly not reparations. So, and the answer to that is, one, it's important to understand how the report is organized. Final report. Hold on.
Okay, we're almost finished,
So the final report is organized in a way that there will be reparations recommendation, but because the law that created the task force also asked the task force to talk about law that they want to change, there will be that in there too. That's not reparations though. And the task force is not saying that that's reparations. The report doesn't say that's reparations. And people were rightly confused though. People were like, well, why do I see repeal the death penalty in this reparations report? That's not reparations. And it's in the not reparations section.
Okay.
It's in the section that's called, these are laws we want to change basically, but this is not reparations.
Is that something that we have to keep an eye on?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. We have to
So
make
please
sure.
make sure that you sign in. Anybody that didn't, you want to keep up with what's going on. We're going to have more of these. And please, if you didn't sign in, Nicole, raise your hand in the back. She has the sign-in sheet. I want to give acknowledgement to Nicole, who's my office manager.
Thank you, Nicole.
So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
I want to thank my vice president, attorney, Tijuana Barker. For stepping in while I was on the train trying to get here. So please give Tia a round of applause. I'm sure that happens. And our own faithful, give Chris love. For making sure that this happens. And so if he wants to stick around and answer some more questions, he can do that. And back in the day, we used to say, you gotta leave here.
You ain't gotta go home.
But you don't have to go home.
But the Sacramento task force that you're talking about, would that take an additional 2 years? Or with what time restraints are we talking?
They're trying to, within this year, they're trying to put it together this year.
So that means more waiting.
Right, so it took them 2 years for the state, and then how long for San Francisco for them to roll out like a bill?
Well,
It would depend. It really depends on what we ask. We will be able to direct how long it is, what they do.
the mayor said he wants to have this issue.
Where do we send our documentation to?
Did we